It was a warm summer night in Las Vegas, 1974. The showroom of the International Hotel was packed with more than 15,000 excited fans. The atmosphere was electric. Elvis Presley, dressed in his signature white jumpsuit, sparkling under the stage. Lights was midway through a powerful performance of Suspicious Minds. The audience was clapping, singing, and completely lost in the magic of the king. Elvis was smiling, moving across the stage with that unmistakable charisma that only he had. And then, something happened that no one could have predicted. From the left side of the crowd, a man suddenly stood up, shouting angrily. His voice cut through the music like a knife. "Elvis, you ruined my daughter's life," the band faltered. Elvis turned his head sharply, startled. The crowd went quiet, confused. Then, before anyone could stop him, the man began pushing his way toward the stage. He was in his mid-40s, wearing a plain suit, his face red with rage, his fists clenched. The audience gasped as security rushed forward. "Sir, you need to sit down," one of the guards warned, but the man pushed harder. His voice grew louder. "You filled her head with lies with this rock and roll nonsense. She doesn't listen to me anymore. You stole my daughter from me." Elvis raised his hand, motioning for his band to stop. The music fell silent. A thick tension filled the room. For a moment, nobody moved. The man was now just a few feet from the stage, pointing angrily at Elvis. The crowd was on edge. Wait, was there going to be a fight? But Elvis didn't flinch. He stepped forward slowly, holding his microphone in one hand, his other hand open in a calming gesture. "Let him come," Elvis said gently. The guards froze in shock. The crowd gasped. Nobody could believe it. Elvis Presley was inviting the furious man onto his stage. The man climbed up clumsily, breathing heavily, shaking with anger. He faced Elvis directly, standing just a few feet away from the king of rock and roll, and that's when the impossible confrontation began. The man stood trembling on stage, his voice raw with fury. His eyes locked on Elvis, but beneath the anger there was something deeper. Pain, fear, desperation. "Do you even know what you've done to families like mine?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the silent arena. "You stand up here with your shiny suits and your hips shaking, filling kids' heads with rebellion. My daughter used to listen to me. Now she only listens to you. She thinks you're some kind of saint. She sneaks out at night. She defies me. She says Elvis understands me better than my own father." The audience gasped. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The man's face crumpled as he continued, his voice cracking. "She's only 17, and she doesn't care about school or church or her family anymore. She cares about you, because you poisoned her mind with this rock and roll filth." Some in the audience booed, others shouted, "Sit down." But Elvis didn't move. He kept his eyes on the man, listening intently. "She says your songs are about freedom, about love, about finding yourself. But what about me? What about her father?" The man's voice broke. "She used to hold my hand. She used to ask for my advice. Now she slams the door in my face and says I'll never understand her." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The man was no longer just angry, he was broken. "Do you know what it's like," he whispered hoarsely, "to lose your daughter to a stranger you've never even met?" For the first time the anger drained from his voice. His hands dropped to his sides. His face showed not just fury, but heartbreak. The arena was frozen. Security waited for Elvis's signal. The audience waited for Elvis's words, and Elvis, still calm, leaned slightly toward the microphone. His voice was low but firm. "Brother, maybe it's time you hear what I have to say." The audience gasped. The confrontation had shifted. Elvis was about to answer, not with anger but with something else. For a long moment, Elvis didn't move. The man's words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and impossible to ignore. Thousands of people leaned forward in their seats, waiting to see if the king of rock and roll would defend himself, fire back, or call security. But instead, Elvis did something no one expected. He set his microphone down gently on the piano. He walked across the stage with slow, deliberate steps, his white jumpsuit shimmering under the spotlight. His face wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was something else, compassion mixed with sorrow. When he reached the man, Elvis held out his hand. "Sir," he said softly, so only those nearby could hear at first. "I never wanted to take your daughter away from you. Music is not here to replace a father's love. It's here to remind us of it." The man stared at him, still shaking, but his anger faltered. Elvis looked out at the audience, then back to the man and continued, "I sing because I believe in love, in family, in hope. If she hears that in my songs, it's not because I put it there, it's because it's already in her heart. A father's love is the first music a child ever hears. Nothing I do could ever erase that." He placed a reassuring hand on the man's shoulder. "Maybe she isn't pulling away from you. Maybe she's reaching out for you in a new way. Maybe she wants you to hear her the same way she hears me." The arena was silent except for the sound of Elvis's calm voice echoing through the speakers. Then Elvis bent down, picked up his microphone again, and with a steady breath he said to the man, "You came here tonight angry, but I don't think anger is what's really in your heart. I think it's love. And I respect that more than anything in this world." The man's eyes welled up. He looked at Elvis, not as an enemy, but as someone who might finally understand him. The crowd, sensing the shift, began to applaud softly. It wasn't the wild cheering of a rock concert. It was something deeper, more reverent. And Elvis, standing tall under the spotlight, was about to turn this confrontation into something unforgettable. Elvis stood there, breathing deeply, the weight of 15,000 eyes pressing down on him. The father's voice still echoed in the arena, raw with anger and fear. For a moment it looked as if chaos might erupt, security on edge, the crowd whispering, tension climbing like a storm ready to break. But then Elvis lowered his microphone, stepped closer to the man, and did something no one expected. He opened his arms. "Sir," he said softly, his southern drawl carrying through. The silent hall. "I am not here to take your daughter away. I'm here to remind her, and remind you, that music is meant to heal, not to destroy." The man froze. He hadn't expected compassion. He had come armed with rage, but Elvis disarmed him with kindness. Elvis slowly reached out and placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. "You love your daughter, I respect that. I would never stand in the way of a father's love. But maybe tonight we can both love her the same way. With protection, not anger." The audience held its breath. You could feel the shift, the transformation of energy in the room. The man's clenched fists loosened, his shoulders dropped. His face, twisted with fury moments before, now wavered between shame and relief. Elvis then turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice breaking just slightly, "every one of us in this room has someone we would fight for. Her daughter, a son, a loved one. Let us not fight against each other, but for each other." And then in that instant he began to sing, not one of his hits, but a quiet gospel hymn, "Peace in the Valley." His voice filled the arena like a prayer. The father, stunned, found himself trembling, tears streaming down his face. Slowly the man's knees buckled, and he sat down, overcome. Around him, the audience joined in, their voices rising, 15,000 strong. What had begun has confrontation transformed into communion. Elvis had taken anger and turned it into collective healing. When the final notes of "Peace in the Valley" faded into the air, there was silence. Not the silence of fear, but of awe. The kind of silence that happens when 15,000 hearts beat in unison. Then, like a wave breaking, the entire arena erupted into applause. People stood, clapping through tears, cheering not just for Elvis the performer, but for Elvis the man who had just transformed conflict into compassion. The father, still trembling, reached for his daughter's hand. She smiled up at him, eyes wet but shining. In that moment there was no stage, no spotlight, only a family reunited under the power of music. Elvis bent down, handed the girl one of his iconic scarves and whispered, "Take care of your daddy. He loves you more than you know." The crowd roared, many unable to hold back their sobs. For the rest of that night, every song Elvis sang carried a new weight. He wasn't just performing. He was teaching, healing, reminding everyone present that love was stronger than fear, and understanding stronger than anger. And the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, the legend of the night Elvis calmed a father's rage, spread like wildfire. Fans repeated it, newspapers hinted at it, and those who were there swore it was the most unforgettable concert of their lives. Decades later, the daughter, now grown, would give an interview. With tears in her eyes, she recalled, "That night Elvis didn't just save the concert, he saved my father. He reminded him what love was, and he reminded me that kindness can change everything." That became Elvis's legacy, not only the king of rock and roll, but the king of empathy, a man who could take a moment of near violence and turn it into a hymn of peace that still echoes today.